Welcome back to another episode of Home Court Health. I'm still tomfoolery, still a horse tomfoolery, still a horse's ass at times, although, as we'll talk about today, it is often good to be the fool, and it's good to be here with you all today. A rainy day, loving that about April. I would say as a tennis player, the only thing I really resent is the wind. I actually had a great post rainy day session with a buddy the other day where the courts were still slick. And granted, the sun was coming out and we still got to make the most of it. Although when the wind strikes, it's really fairly intolerable. And I'm still reminded, if you are compelled to play on a windy day, we're not playing for many stakes. Uh, it's a great opportunity for mental turnaround, which is to say to yourself, I love the wind because my opponent hates the wind. And I've been given so many quality examples of the the most accepted way to describe that is mental toughness. And I think that's up there with mental health to describe it and to name it as something distinct from just being healthy or tough. And I mean, there's a level of health that is deeply related to resilience. And but all health is, and I'm still vibing here. I'm loving this jazz vibe that I'm on right now, so I'm keeping it rolling for now. I'm not really sweating any copyright issues apparently. Uh, Full credit to whoever made this because I sure didn't. Uh, yeah, I just did this breakdown on my Instagram of AKA I call it because I was finding myself saying these things and qualifying them because they seem so like we take them for granted to say something like raw milk, and it's really just milk. I mean, for something to come out raw and untreated, that just means it literally is what it is. And for us then to distinguish uh, low fat or 1% or 2%, whole skim, oat, fake, whatever, it's just deviation from the original. And the original is often so much better than anything else. Another great example of this in entertainment, before we get back to the powerful magic of words, is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And of course, I'm talking about Gene Wilder in 1971. There's so much brilliance in that, and a lot of that brilliance was, or my awareness of that brilliance was directed by the inimitable Owen Benjamin, the Big Bear of Barataria, because he did an epic breakdown via some streams of that movie and the stories therein. And I mean, we tried to watch the Johnny Depp one, and first of all, it's a little darker, not in an overt way. It's I think it's just it's missing the mark on trying to be more magical or fantastic, and I don't really dig that because I like more Gene Wilder's character, and I mean part of it's sure they don't have CGI and super special effects and great. I mean there's a lot of power in presenting an image or presenting imagination that way. That just makes Wonka seem so much more accessible. That he's not this otherworldly, green-haired, pale-skinned, bright-teethed magician. He can still be a wizard because he is, and he and yet he's playing in the realm, and very much so. I mean, that's a much simpler way of storytelling for the original to be much better than any copy that's that people try to improve on. So we have things like I said, I posted this on my Instagram, Home Court Health. Home birth, also known as birth. Raw milk, also known as milk. Alternative health, one of my favorites, also known as health. Unfluoridated water, also known as water. And organic food, also known as food. And people have pointed these things out in different ways and at different times, and I'm not unique in compiling them like that. Alternative health for me was one that always felt weird to say because to for instance, reject something, and this gets into the whole uh, any anytime you're in the camp of anti, then first of all, if you identify with that, I think there is more of an energy of antagonism, which is to say that you feel good being being in a fight over something that doesn't need to be fought over, especially something like health or your own freedom around health choices. And anti-vaxxer is certainly a common moniker these days, and people think that they can. I mean, I guess technically I fit that bill, and yet, I mean, I'm so anti. I'm anti-vaxxer because there's I of course I say of course if you've been listening to me and you've listened to What If My Body Is Brilliant and you've followed any of the recommendations I've given for research and further education on the basics of health, then you know that I accept a much more beautiful and truly holistic and balanced view of health that holds space for disease as a place where, and I was reading about this in a great book called, uh, or it's, the title is escaping me. It's a book on musculoskeletal treatment via homeopathy. And one of the principles around health is that symptoms are just an expression. They're not negative and they're not anything that should create fear in anyone. They're just signals. And uh, I've been reflecting a lot more on the signals that we are constantly bombarded with because it is a lot. I mean, you there's a good chance that you may not be just listening to my voice. You might be doing a task and still running a program in the back of your mind, which is about what you have to do tomorrow or later today, and that task or that conversation you left undone, and that part of you that is knocking at the door of your heart that you refuse to acknowledge. And there's so much complexity to our experience, and so for symptoms to crop up, uh, most of those are just visits from the pain teacher that require our attention. And so when it comes to the issue of vaccination, first of all, I reject the germ theory. So I don't believe that there's anything that my body needs to really be protected from in terms of uh, external invisible threats, you could say. And that has been the most empowering aspect of my health journey, I would say, is to because that steered me to go almost exclusively inward. And I've grappled with, I think I talked about this on the last episode as well, when it comes to supplements and things that you can add into your capital D diet or just in your regimen in general, is it is so tempting to think that you are going to do more with more, and less is more is generally the most potent practice. I believe now, and I can continue to play with that. And so to heap on something like a vaccine schedule as a child, as an infant, as a newborn, that no longer makes sense to me because first of all, there are no external threats that even a new you can say defenseless life. I mean, yeah, they don't have newborns and babies and toddlers do not have the resilience that they are entitled to. And it is an entitlement as long as we don't harm them, which we do. And I say we, and I'm connecting to the collective experience as a parent, as a sibling, as a child. I mean, I've lived all those experiences, I know somehow, and I'm actually just saying that for the first time because I mean, I haven't explored the depths of any of my past incarnations or anything like that. And still, I resonate with that experience of my soul. And just now recognizing that I have been a parent before and that that is a life that I can live again because my soul has some memory of that. And yeah, I mean, so to tap into that and to know that plenty of of wards and I shouldn't say wards of offspring of the human race have survived and thrived prior to the introduction of vaccines. And I mean, I don't need to get into a whole debate. Again, I'm not a debater. I don't really go fight against other people's beliefs. And shoot, that's another thing lately too. Is I am much more disciplined about my about the opportunities I pursue to the first word that came to mind was to convert someone, that's certainly not my game to be an evangelist for any point of view. And I mean, I just had a great challenge with that with a dear friend who just notified me that he did not agree with my stance on the germ theory. And it is a theory, just like the theory of gravity. You can wherever you go to start your searches, if it's Google or somewhere else, you can type in the theory of gravity and have a more comprehensive understanding of why it is a theory. And I mean, it can be a useful theory. I come from the world of sport where we talk about our center of gravity and our spine and our head between our shoulders as a way in which we can then produce force or move through space. And I mean, there's a lot of uh, I would say fundamental in a way. I think of it now more as our center of density. I think density, buoyancy, levity, those things. You know how because we have substances that float and fly, and in some ways, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of contrary evidence. I would say just which just makes something a theory that it keeps it from being an established natural law or law of nature. And so when I am feeling more bound to the philosophy of terrain and the terrain view of health, and again, rejecting the germ theory, and I'm pretty vocal about that, then I know people get triggered. And triggered, I don't mean in a soft way. And shout out to my brother, he knows who he is. Triggered is such a valuable thing because such a valuable experience because it's another signal to us. I mean, I had this experience just on a 30-minute drive back from dinner with my love is getting triggered at least twice in an otherwise very, I mean, it was a charged conversation, not a fight. And with a charge like that, I mean, yeah, there's things that come up, and thankfully it's so obvious to me when I get triggered that usually it's in a moment of where I'm denying something, and that is one of the best signals I have of a shadow or an unresolved issue. And simply put, a trigger is that when I react in a less than stable way, which I'm called to do as a man, is to mostly hold the space for chaos and not let it sway me one way or the other. So when something pulls me way off center, that's that's a perfect signal for me to tune into. And it's the same with symptoms, for things to be suppressed and rejected, then and speaking of suppressed, let's suppress the music for now. Although again, total vibe. I gotta give this some shout if I know how to say. 'Cause I know it's like an Afro beat. And Kelvin Momo, shout out Kelvin Momo. Ama piano is the genre for that. Who knew? And yeah, I can listen to a 3 hour, 40-minute album of that for sure. So continuing back on the track here, the suppression of symptoms is, I mean, I've certainly gone down that road for a long time. I'm most plagued by poison ivy and have done anything and everything in years past to just, give me whatever steroid, give me whatever topical s- to reduce and suppress this experience of pain. And I feel like that's a natural instinct, and I know so much of the to bring it full circle back to talking about vaccines and germ theory and things like that. And I'll the capstone of this will be why I believe this is the place from which so much of my evolving life experience emanates from, the health discussion, and why I'm so compelled to share it with others is that, first of all, deeply empowering to think that, okay, anything that really happens to me is happening from within me. And this is not to deny the potential symptomatic experience of toxic overload, to be if I'm poisoning myself or subject to various poisons in any way, then things have to come up physically from that. And first they happen energetically. So to then, I tap into the experience of as a parent if I did not have this knowledge, and also when I do. I mean, even also with the idea that a baby of mine, a life I've brought into the world with its mother, would be vulnerable to pain and discomfort and anything that might threaten its life, then again, a fairly understandable and reasonable reaction. I'll say reaction instead of response would be, let's do anything to keep my baby safe. And so those of you out there tackling those questions, I feel you. And for me, I there was a time when I just was weighing the balance of, well, vaccine ingredients are poisonous. So do you really feel like the trade-off between injection into the bloodstream of something which, if it spills on the floor, is considered to be a hazardous waste, and you can only touch it if you have a hazmat suit on, and that's all the mercury and aluminum and dead this and chemical that, petroleum this, and various uncontrolled substances as well. This amalgamation of toxicity that you're supposed to have this. I mean, some of the explanations for it is crazy. Is like to have an immediate visceral defensive reaction is a normal thing. Okay, yeah. I mean, the body is going to bat for you to protect you from this poison, and then the leap that's made is that this is going to be something that has stimulated your defense systems for life. And that trade-off, when you think of how you can poison, injure, debilitate a helpless life, and I know people to whom that has happened. Just, I mean, from a black and white standpoint, it doesn't seem worth it to me. I am advocating for not to evangelize, not to convert, not to make you all feel badly if you don't agree with me. It's not what this is about. I am advocating for the more beautiful and most empowering view of health, because from here, when we acknowledge that we are the most responsible, our responsibility is our ability to respond to any situation that takes us off of our center, that derails us from our highest and best adventures in life, in terms of seeking our highest and best selves. Doesn't mean there won't be challenges. That's certainly part of it. uh, Anything that takes us off that track from fear, and especially from, with that fear creating the slippery slope of, well, then I'll just give up as much of my responsibility and power as possible for someone else to figure that out for me. And we all do this. I mean, no one I know, maybe some people I know of, and people who have graduated from Earth School in their physical forms, have been truly free. And still, it is such a worthy pursuit. And part of freedom is, I believe, looking foolish from time to time is that freedom. And I'm compiling as best I can a collection of quotations around the fool, because I've had sufficient experiences with that fear of not wanting to look foolish. And I've spoken on this before in more intimate circles, and I believe those circles can now ripple throughout the airwaves, and to do this and share with people that the language that we take for granted, to say that, in the example of taking an exam or answering a question as right or wrong to a little child and an unassuming adult, you can you can interpret those words as meaning, when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. When I'm wrong, I'm bad. And when I'm right, I'm good. And I don't know where that program fits into the grand scheme. I just know that I'm deeply wary of it. And as usual, I love when I do this, that I'm cruising along and my mic is not even on. See, I'm still again, this is oh yeah, this is being the fool. Is you do just have to laugh it off because otherwise the old me would be cursing and things would be broken, no doubt. God, what fucking perfect timing. Oh, and that's really all you can ask for things to be that obvious sometimes. Oh, God bless America, that's so great. And you gotta be grateful for just that little smack, that little pinch that lets you know that you're not as brilliant as you think. And I thankfully, I feel like that happens to me at least once a day, where right about uh when I'm getting above my raisin, when I'm getting too big for my britches, usually something immediate happens that I get feedback that I'm not the ascended master I fancy myself to be in that moment. Although I will say, today in the gym was just a tremendous session with Dr. Movement because I went in with sort of a healing intention and doing some isometrics and doing some very comfortable flows, a lot of moving of my spine and just playing. I mean, some of my best workouts are, well, I guess some of them are work-ins because yeah, I'm really not expending energy, and this is why I'm such a major advocate for incorporating that into your training. And training is a good overall description for what it is that we do when it comes to fitness. And uh, and still I'm trying to choose my words more deliberately around, especially how I communicate with others, what it is that I do. Like, I don't say I'm going to lift anymore. I say I'm going to do a resistance workout, or I'm going to do a strength workout, because I really don't. I mean, I'm moving weights. A lot of it's cable or bands, or I mean, there's free weights. It's just not a lift like I'm picking heavy shit up off the ground. I did that for a time, and when you know better, you do better. And I'll probably expound another time on just what a terrible risk to reward I find barbell deadlifts to be. Doesn't mean I avoid the picking up movement, or the hinging movement as it's known, because that's fundamental. You still need to be able to bend at the waist and have a certain degree of flexibility, mobility, stability, and strength to make that happen. It's just usually much more dynamic. And even though there's just a quick breakdown of the barbell deadlift, having a bar there at, just below knee height, all the weights distributed out to the sides. I mean, training for life, there's very few examples where that is a payoff, because we pick up weird stuff and it's usually a lot closer to our bodies. This is why picking up heavy sandbags or stones or things like that is so much more dynamic, because you wrap your arms around something, you get even lower. You do have to have a certain degree of mobility with the spine, where it's not completely rigid, and you don't depend solely on your lower back to go from hinge to straight up, while the weight is in your hands, shearing your spine and pulling it back down, not necessarily because of gravity, just because heavy ass shit. And yeah, so I mean, this is to say, when I began to choose freedom of movement and feeling better, feeling springy, feeling fast, then that's when things really open up for me. And I go in the gym and play. And today was a great play because I think I went in without much expectation, and yeah, well, it wasn't a performance driven workout. And yet I know that having play days like this is so key to growth, and to certainly to healing, and also just feeling athletic for a sport of tennis, which requires such deep levels of athleticism than anything else I do. Uh, was just a lot. I mean, the hand eye was there, the bounciness, the movement was there, the focus was there, and I didn't really have to conjure that. And a lot of that came from actually listening to hearing Arthur Ashe and Stan Smith, two legends of American tennis in the 60s and 70s, hearing them speak about flow and I guess they used to refer to Arthur Ashe as the guy who hit no brainer shots. And I mean, I do get away from saying no brainer. You got to have your brain about you. You got to have your wits about you for certain things. And like when it comes to business and real estate decisions, I never say this is a no brainer. We still have to bring in our mental faculties. And I'm not just nitpicking. I mean, I feel like these are valuable things to reevaluate when we say them. However, sports being and athletic endeavors being so in terms of the mind body reality, the mind body physicality, then you can distinguish. I mean, the mind sort of in flow, it is so consumed by the body, and I mean, again, these are deeply interwoven physical experiences we do. I mean, the mind is not quite the brain. It's more of an intangible. We talk about mental toughness. We talk about the mental aspect of the game. Yogi Berra said 90% of hitting is mental, the other half is physical. And I was just learning a little bit more about Yogi Berra and what a legend he was. And so Yogi Berra got it, gets it, totally gets it. Arthur Ashe gets it, got it. Rest in peace to both those. Stan Smith gets it because they talked about that. I really liked how Stan Smith described it, that you're really not thinking about how to hit the ball. You're loosely thinking of your strategy, and that is very much contained to this point, and therefore this ball. And I mean, these are the great dynamics of tennis, that the score is what brings about mental pressure, or any sort of self-imposed pressure. Otherwise, you let your mind go, uh, where I think where it's magnetically drawn to. It's not that it totally escapes and then you're out to lunch and your mind is wandering out into the stands or into the locker room or into your diary. It's still very much there with you. It's just that the body is able to express itself with less mental effort. And this is very much what I try to remind people when we do tennis lessons, that whatever I tell them is already retained by the subconscious. And we get into trouble when we are so actively trying to conjure up those lessons and those bits of feedback to practice, instead of just at some point, I really just say, do what comes naturally. Just go hit it, let it rip, let it loose. And that looseness, it was Arthur Ashe who coined the phrase to describe great tennis, of being uh, mentally tight and physically loose. And the opposite happens when we're stressed, is you get physically tight and mentally loose. So there is a containment that goes into flow, and it is just contained to you and your point. Often you're anticipating what the opponent is doing because you have a connection with them as well. And I think a lot of this speaks to the different characters that we cultivate for ourselves. And so to be a competitor, to be an athlete, means to seek out that flow state. Is, where do I find the optimal intersection of challenge and ease, so to speak, where I'm not too stressed out because it's so demanding, and then I'm not finding this to be too simple, and so I get bored. And we all have, I mean, we fluctuate, and flow is very hard to keep up. And still, it's something we have to practice. You go into those situations. And I think there's a flow as well for just how we sit with things, and do we give ourselves the space to flow? Do we establish banks of the river where, okay, we do say that's dry land, and I'll get back there in a minute, but can I float down the river for a little while in the stream of my own consciousness? And yeah, I mean, I actually, on that tape with Arthur Ashe and Stan Smith, Vic Braden was the host, and Vic Braden, may he rest in peace, and grateful for all of his many contributions to I mean, positively abundant contributions to the world of tennis. And he is one of the pillars of the great base tennisist. And I've interviewed Dave Anderson. That episode is Conscious Coaching. Dave Anderson continues to be the director of Brookhaven Tennis Club. country club, I should say, in the Dallas Fort Worth area in Texas, producing elite collegiate, junior successful, and also professional players as well. And he, being a student of the Great Bay system, is intimately aware of Vic Braden's positive impact on the world of tennis. And Vic was really a psychologist and understood people so well. And so I loved when when his recapitulation of one of the segments of his instructional, talking about strokes and talking about the technical aspect, which is so, so heavy on the conscious side for most of us in terms of, well, how am I going to manipulate my grip and my wrist and my arm and my legs and my hips and my head to hit a perfect forehand. And I love that Vic emphasized in the end, uh, go think about it for a little while, off the court, go whatever you're trying to change. Whenever there's something, especially something that's new to you and does have an educational experience to it, maybe we don't always need to be so caught up in the doing and the performance of it. There is and of course, there's overdoing and there's underdoing, there's overthinking and there's underthinking. So, although what I like to say, if you can see me on the screen here, I'm taking my hands out to the total widths of the screen. The middle, everything in the middle. The middle is such a big space. I'm not talking about, smack dab in the middle. That is the perfect center. That is stillness. That is a centeredness where we do aspire to get to. There's just so much in the middle between the over and the under, the two extremes. And I like to think that metaphor is so obvious for people still stuck in the right left paradigm of politics or ideologies that, don't worry, there's plenty of space in the middle for people to get together. And so very much the same can be said for what, especially new tasks and new skills that we're learning, is to go into that space of when it is the critical thinking space, entering in there and just thinking, okay, how am I conceiving of this? I'm hearing coach's words. Do those make sense to me? Is there a way that this is really going to click into place and align for me? And yeah, I mean, in my when I was into Olympic weightlifting and the all the technical instruction that goes with that, because I mean, for those of you who don't know, one of the staple, trying to think, I mean, the clean is really a couple of movements, and clean and jerk is really a couple of movements, so that is pretty complex. The snatch, though, I mean, to grab up, to be in a squat position or at least a hinged position, holding the barbell almost at its entire width. You stand up with that in a very explosive manner and catch it overhead in a squatting position. Highly technically demanding exercise, and it's part of my criticisms of things like CrossFit is you never mistake activity for achievement, as John Wooden said, and for people just to do the activity of doing a sufficient snatch over and over and over and over and over again is certainly something that leads to maladaptive uh, postures and issues with the body, issues with the fascia, issues with the joints. That said, when I was doing that, when I was young and feeling strong and feeling fast still and all that, there were I can remember at least one image that or coaching cue that just one day when it made sense to me, it made sense to me because I was really thinking about it. I'd be in the shower or I'd be out doing something else, and I would really think about what it means to get under the bar fast, to dive under the bar. Uh, that I'm already under the bar to catch it. I don't need to pull it up any higher with my upper body because you just can't. At some point, the weight is too much, and it's more about speed and letting yourself be loose before catching it in that strong position again. And so, but that required thought. If I just kept doing, and this was, where was I learning about this? Again, I think this comes back to uh, might have been something baseball related actually, and certainly echoed in the words of Arthur Ashe and Stan Smith and Vic Braden, was that you you can't just work hard and be that grinder for anything. People really do take this approach to exercise and fitness. I was going to say health and exercise. It can be totally different if we're not. We might be talking two different languages if you're not following holistic principles and working in, working out, charging your battery after depleting it and things like that. And some people are so confused why they don't see results or why they don't feel better when they grind through their workouts. And for an already stressed person to compound their stress with the physicality of working out, lifting weights, exhaustion, doing any sort of interval exercises, doing, for instance, I've spoken about this before, doing steady state endurance training, because I was going to say cardio. Everything's cardio. If your heart's pumping like it does, like it always does, effortlessly, and sometimes with some increasing rapidity because you're doing stuff. It's all cardio. Me sitting here, my heart is beating, so it's all cardio. The endurance aspect to do a steady state is that you're in a constant state of stress. If you ride a bike or if you run for 30 minutes, there's a constant state of stress because there's no break. If you are doing a resistance or a strength workout for 30 minutes, you do your reps and then you rest. Or you get to the top of a position. If you finish a squat and you stand up, aside from holding the weight, the stress is not as extreme. This is where isometrics are really interesting, because if you're in a lunge position, with your back knee off the ground, your front leg is holding you up, with 70% of the effort, uh, then you do have a constant state of stress. But you're not going to hold that for 28 of the 30 minutes or anything like that. You can, which is called extreme isometrics, and those have their place as well. All of this to say that it is foolish, as I dive back into the meaning of the fool for me these days. Uh, there's so much foolishness masquerading as wisdom. And a lot of it is related to I'll get more with more. And hard work begetting more hard work. Hard work does not beget more hard work. It begets burnout. The harder you work, the more you redline, there will be a stalling, there will be a breakdown at some point. Just had to pause for some water and a quick cauliflower check. Thank God it's spring, because I'm looking forward to some more variety of things to eat for sure. I mean, it's been an eventful winter and early spring, and I'm just looking forward to today. Was actually I was marveling today at how lush everything is already seeming, and it's April 26th. Really feels like spring just arrived this week in a lot of ways. Just more heat and dampness, and certainly the color. The birds are going absolutely bonkers at 5:30 in the morning, which is so great. Uh, but yeah, so there's a lot of the more is more. The more will get you more. The more money you have, the more. And I haven't found that to be true. Again, it's my my experience to pull from does have a lot to do with movement, and because this is how I feel myself. This is how I am able to connect with myself showing up in the world. Is am I able to physically express myself? Does my or do my physical habits support vitality, where I can really leave it all out there on the court, whatever court I'm on, because my energy is great. And there's issues that come up with bad postures if you're not moving well. This is something I'm learning from the likes of Brooke McPoyle with musical breathwork, whom I interviewed, functional patterns as well, to move better in order to feel better. And having super, super heavy weight, the heavier weights you have, or the more weight you carry yourself, that is suboptimal, truly slows you down, and it creates more intensive demands on your organ system, on your musculoskeletal system. And these are the things that lead to reduced health span and lifespan. And there is a most beautiful vision and experience of this world where we regenerate at a much quicker and seamless rate. And the more inputs we have, this is the place I'm trending toward with capital D diet. So all of the things that I take in, if it's information, media, supplements, food, anything like that, that there is some variety. That's where seasonal eating comes in, and changing things up in terms of fasting or frequency of meals. But if we have a lot of signals that we're running and that our body has to deal with, then I think challenges can come up because the body is already dealing with so much. It's already dealing with the energetic and emotional shortcomings we have that we inherited or internalized from our adolescent environments. Certainly, the maybe the unspoken expectations of our world that really do not. I'm reading a beautiful book, Awareness Through Movement by Moshe Feldenkrais, and Feldenkrais is known for again a certain way of moving and expressing mobility. And early on in the book, he's talking about, or he's writing about, that we reach a point for our self-expression is one way of saying it, as our ability to express ourselves in any capacity, where mediocrity or just a sufficient level of skill is acceptable. That once we're able to hang, once we're able to survive, really is what it is. Once we're able to survive in the world, not be ridiculed, and take good enough care of ourselves where, hey, I mean, we're still waking up every day and I didn't die in my sleep. So good enough, right? Still able to reasonably show up and check the boxes off for my work and my obligations. Some people call that living. And there is not a lot of incentive, external incentive, to be the best you can be. Because usually what that looks like is, ironically enough, is that you start to say, well, how do I know that the best I can be is just to work a 9 to 5, or just to continue believing in this religion, or to only have these types of friends and relationships. And that is, that usually turns into a beautiful journey of inquisitiveness and curiosity, and one that I'm certainly on and enriches my life every day. And so I no longer have, well, I shouldn't say I no longer, my protective mechanisms for do I look or sound ridiculous are softening quite a bit. They're not as rigid boundaries as they once were. And thankfully, I'm reminded of legends like Carl Jung, who wrote that there is a mystical fool in me that proved to be stronger than all my science. And I just love that because, of course, the hyperactive, rational mind, the Western mind, the modern mind, of looking for validity, looking for evidence before we do something or before we believe something, is that's certainly a dominant way of engaging with the world now. And yeah, I mean, am I brave enough to be the fool? Am I brave enough to put myself out there and say this is what I believe? And I mean, I do have people. I can't remember the last time I had someone really laugh at me, which might be better. I mean, that was supposed to be the point of the fool in a lot of ways. Is a comical reaction is when someone can recognize the truth, and of the many different images of the fool, you can think of jester or joker or something like that. Usually, someone who is pointing out the log in someone else's eye, so to speak. Uh, Observing. I mean, it was said in royal courts that the purpose of the fool was to constantly check the ego of the monarch so that they were not becoming out of touch with reality and ignoring their own shortcomings. And hopefully you have someone in your life who does that. I am blessed to have at least one person in my life who holds me accountable and is a mirror to me. As for myself, as I've spoken about before, the reason I identify so much with the fool is that there are times that my inner monologue is, what a fucking ridiculous thing to do or to say, and how dare you, and how's that going to make money, and what a waste of time. And those are inherited programs that I can eject that disc with some more practice, because it really doesn't serve me growing and loving and being courageous. And so that, there are so many examples just in the last couple of years. And I forget who I mentioned this to. with on a podcast recently, probably Jacob Diaz, to say that, I mean, I feel like I've covered the whole bloody arc of vaccines and viruses and illness and health and biohacking, and not that I'm through it all. It's just that when I look back on that, one of the things I was always saying, who's to say? You know, someone would say something, even if it was fairly innocuous. Just I was picking up on statements people were making as if they were fact, as if they were universal truths. And if any part of me was skeptical, I would just say, who's to say? Uh, and that felt good, honestly, to play that role. Like for myself as much as for other people, is to be a gut check, and of course, applying that, turning that on myself as much as possible. If it's just me saying, if it's just someone I think is great saying this, is that sufficient to run with in terms of adopting a belief system? And there's a lot of really sexy, seductive people out there that you can just look up on your phone and pull up a video of, and that's that's a very real thing too. And so this is why discernment is one of the highest values that people like Rudolf Steiner encouraged us to cultivate, because it's only between our two ears and only in the contents of our rib cage where our heart is housed. I guess rib cage, sternum. Actually, I haven't opened myself up in a while. That that is the fertile ground where our our flourishing takes place. And we can sure get a lot of inputs, but if things start rattling around inside and we can't organize them, and we don't know what a silent stillness of truth and me-ness, my I-ness, your you-ness feels like, and there's more distractions than ever, and there's more misinformation in the realest way than ever. Uh, there's just to run with something that comes to mind. I used to be, not too long ago, probably more on the camp of just total wide open, no censorship whatsoever. Let adults be adults and let people figure it out. Until I heard from enough people that we should have some sort of obligation as best we can to protecting children and maintaining a childlike innocence. And that would mean on a place like Twitter that I'm not on and haven't been for, feels like 10 years at this point, and have no desire to be part of that arena for various reasons. So that place, which has like crazy amounts of porn, from what I hear, available to you. You can just search it, and there's whole accounts of like video shit and photos, and I am finding that more and more abhorrent, not just for adults, because of what a grotesque energy suck that is anyway, to be fixated with someone else's. Uh, I mean, a lot of what it is now is borderline violent, or at least lacking real love. Because I mean, who really has the best examples of what intimacy and love is anymore? I mean, I know for myself, it's not like I had a preconceived notion of what sexual intimacy was before I watched porn. I mean, that's an education as a young man of 12, 13, I want to say. That seems crazy fucking young, but that's probably true. Uh Hugely damaging. And so now for it to just be, I mean, we live in a porn culture. I mean, it's insane. This is where I think, I mean, again, when I think of who's to say and who's the fool now, people think I'm being foolish or ridiculous or antiquated for not clutching my pearls. Is just I'm more sensitive than ever to, okay, I'm cultivating a sense of spiritual strength where I'm not going to let my energy and my literally my creative juices. I was talking about this the other day on Instagram with Sean O'Malley, who's former UFC champion and studied with Paul Chek and is very aware of holistic health. It was a loss in the UFC, in the fighting octagon, that caused him to revisit some of his health practices. And he said that he stopped smoking weed, stopped using social media heavily, stopped video gaming, and stopped jerking off and watching porn. And of all of those, the one that I thought was probably the most potent as a man, as a fighter, as an athlete, was guarding his creative juices. Now that I understand so much more about chi and life force energy, that I mean, to remove. First of all, it was pointed out to me long ago by Luke Story, who I believe I've mentioned on this podcast, OG podcaster, Texas based after being LA based, uh, veteran of the health space, and especially having a media presence around it. I remember listening to him years ago say that one of the worst parts of watching porn is the biochemical reaction of, you do go through some expression of euphoria and satisfaction, and then you have to grapple with the fact that you're alone. And that is pretty crushing. I mean, that is pretty, whether we acknowledge it or not, the fact that we don't have a woman's body and her smell and her beating heart, and of course her as a person, as a personality as well, to interact with afterward, is massively deflating. And to do that over and over and over and over again creates a numbness. And I mean, that numbness is also an extension of, I don't think I'm going too far afield to bring up that that numbness also relates to circumcision and the fact that removing the skin from the penis and the friction that you then get all day long with a cut penis with no protection totally reduces the level of sensitivity. Uh, there's a relationship to, the vagina and intercourse like that, and so these are all the levels that I'm starting to pay attention to. And now I feel like people are retarded when they try to advocate for things like it's okay to be to have constant access to things like pornography. And so to bring this back to the point of, where I trying to level out perspectives, that when I was thinking, okay, yeah, just, let everybody be adults and no restrictions on anything. Uh, People will have a right to some level of censorship. So I don't really take censorship that personally anymore. I think thankfully now we all do have a lot of avenues for. I mean, you have to go to bat for yourself, and I still found a way in the throes of 2020 and 21 and 22 and beyond to find out what I thought was the best outlets of information. And I have an internet connection and I have technology and I made full use of that. And I constantly asked who's to say and what's next and what can I do better and what feels right. And that helps spur me along the journey constantly. And yeah, so some level of censorship people do have. Thankfully for people like Owen Benjamin, who has been kicked off of everything in what seems like a concerted conspiracy of censorship of him, when major media platforms are shutting him down for no express violation of terms and conditions. He acknowledged, he said, I'm not entitled to a YouTube account. I don't have a right to an Instagram account, because I didn't create those things. And I believe that is a maxim of natural law, that if you create something, you own it. And if you don't create it, you don't own it. And so, I mean, yeah, I don't own StreamYard where I'm casting it. I don't own much, honestly, because I haven't created too much yet. However, I'm creating with my voice, I'm creating with my service, I'm creating with my experience to circulate that as freely as I can to others. And that usually does require that I do some foolish things on my own, or I do them and then then share any wisdom that comes from that. One of the first and most poetic quotations I discovered that planted the seed for me in terms of identifying with the fool archetype was the William Blake line that said, "If the fool would but follow his folly, he would become wise." If the fool would but follow his folly, he would become wise. It's worth letting that sit for a moment, and I hope that resonates with you in the special way that it resonates with me today, because like I said, we have a lot of overriding programs that keep us from having regular check-ins with our follies, and I think if we did, we would realize that they're usually not as bad as we think. They're usually pretty revealing. I've found that. I mean, there is a courage. Yeah, I mean I don't know if I can bring this up real quick. I should be able to. I don't know how ambitious I'm feeling in terms of technology stuff. So in tarot, the one of the most common images for the fool that is inspiring my logo presence and media presence, and for a reason, not just because I think it looks dope. And shout out to my love for helping create it, for using her creative energy to take something that I envision and then having it as an avatar in the world. It's this young man with his head literally in the clouds or looking up in the sky and then walking off of a cliff. And often there is a parallel cliff depicted as well. And so we're sort of wondering, is it going to be a long enough step that gets him there, or is he doomed? There's so much other great. I'll have to bring one up here in terms of the all the metaphors around taking those long walks off short cliffs, so to say, uh, where yeah, I remember there was a Tibetan Buddhist maxim that said, "The bad news is you're falling through the air with no parachute. The good news is there's no ground below you." And I mean, a cousin of that is, my master pushed me and I didn't fall. I sprouted wings. It's very much akin to that, where if what other people say is foolish, which is the daydreaming and the imagination, I'll bring this back to Willy Wonka real quick. One of the best musical lines from that movie is, "If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Try to change the world. There's nothing to it." And that whole song is about imagination. Come with me and you'll see a world of pure imagination. And yet they're all seeing it. So the imagination aspect is, for my money's worth, intimately related to the fool, of that inquisitiveness, the ability to daydream, and start to create visions for your life that seem surreal. And usually what that looks like is, I mean, given the choice between my outlook on life, which is when I'm at my best, it's abundant and intelligent, and for my own experience of reality, it's all working in my favor to some way or another. Of course, I have to intersect with others and whatever's working in their favor. Uh, is I mean, in a in the deeply ironic way, is I'm looking at other people and saying, well, who's the fool now? I mean, I'm seeing a lot of retarded, foolish, ridiculous, insane, unconscionable behavior out there that is anti-life, that is anti-happiness, that is anti-healing, and in the colloquial or the common use of the word fool is, people think someone's being an idiot. I don't think of course, they don't really get the depth of that limited English word. That's how I'm looking around. Is I and I do step back. Is I used to be, what's it going to take for people to wake up? How can I accelerate that? We're all walking each other home. We're all heading in many different directions, so it's not the same destination. Home is that great cliche. Home is where the heart is. Home is a feeling, and people have to get there through their own trials and tribulations and triumphs. And I would never rob anyone of that divine timing, because no one has been interceding for me. No one has really, uh, at least in recent memory, no one has intervened with me. I haven't received any interventions for my beliefs where people think I'm really doing damage and need their help. So I'm grateful to make my own mistakes. That's a big part of being the fool too. Is that level of freedom where I feel again, when I'm at my best, if I can just let it rip and of course, this is qualified by that I'm not out there doing damage. It's not like me letting it rip is I'm just a terrible Tom Tornado that is going to wreak havoc. No, I'm showing up with an earnest heart and a desire to serve and connect. And if in my overzealousness or if in my lack of skill I step wrongly, then only I get to respond and only I get to make amends. And along the way, I develop some level of wisdom. So there's again with that imagery of the fool in tarot, that boyishness, that youthful inexperience, and we deride ignorance because we think modernity knows it all. That we've explained gravity and we've explained the health and illness, and that of course is deeply typifying hubris. And the gods, however they manifest, do let us know when we are too far afield, and that's so much of what's happening now is we're paying for our hubris. Sometimes karma is fairly immediate; it doesn't wait till future lifetimes to represent itself. And yeah, I mean, I like to say I'm on my second childhood in a lot of ways because I am developing a better relationship with not knowing, and the things that I fancy I know, I am very passionate about. I am very amused by them. I'm very titillated by them, and that's what generally makes me, my cup to overflow and want to pour out and fill other people's cups with the things that I've learned and experienced and created for myself, and just seeing how they compare. And when I find like similar hearted people, then we very much vibe off each other, which is why I'm going to this event called Confluence, which I'll be posting about in the San Antonio area of Texas in Bandera in just a couple of weeks, because that is an event where so many of the foundational philosophies and beliefs that I'm recapitulating for the benefit of you all, for my sphere of influence here, started with people who will be attending and speaking at that event. And this is what we are tasked with doing now: is we can't complain that we're disconnected or that we don't have a high, a tribe that is attracted by our vibe, because it's all virtual. We go meet them wherever they are, whenever we can. And I'm excited that I'm saying yes to that and have the support to do that. And I'll certainly be coming back with stories. Definitely time for one more podcast in the interim. Today was a good day. This was a day when I was enjoying some recovery, recharging the battery, a lot of low and slow type activity, and wasn't sure if I was going to jump on the mic. And I'm glad I did, because there's always a lot of examples of that you do something because you know that you should, even though you have a lot of signals and programs saying, no, I'll just mail it in today or do it another day, do it another time. Uh, there are very few shoulds in life, and I like to pay attention to the ones that come from within me, not that there's a should coming from something that I feel from outside. That if I'm really listening, it's a feeling I have with inside. So for you, this is your reminder to feel your feelings, feel what's going on both in between your ears and inside your chest cavity, to that beautiful, lively, vital heart of yours. Spending time outside helps with that. The sun is free energy. The earth is free energy. The water and air are free energy available to you. Tap into them. Less is more. See what you can subtract today, something that you have a sense is not really serving you. So you can add years and lots of joy to your life by subtracting. And yeah, check in with me if there's anything I've said that you'd like resources on. The the treasure chest continues to fill up with, I mean, I think world class resources, and I'll start to circulate them in a more centralized way. And until then, be a fool for your own life. And I'm signing off to go be foolish in my own way. Much love, team.